You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius.
Have you ever lost someone so important that you felt like your world was ending? Maybe a parent, a child, or a spouse whose absence left a void so deep you weren't sure you could continue. Nearly 2,000 years ago, Marcus Aurelius faced a nightmare that would break most people. He lost 8 of his 13 children and his beloved wife Faustina. Yet instead of being destroyed by grief, he discovered a philosophy that transformed unbearable pain into unshakable strength. By the end of this video, you'll have the 3-step framework Marcus used to not just survive devastating loss, but to find meaning and peace in the midst of it. Picture Rome at its zenith, 161 AD. The empire stretches from Britain to the Euphrates, golden and seemingly invincible. But for Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, paradise has become a house of mourning. The marble corridors of the palace echo with silence, where children's laughter once filled the air. His first loss came when he was still learning to rule. In 151 AD, his firstborn daughter Domitia Faustina died as an infant. Marcus wrote to his friend Fronto with heartbreaking detail, "The diarrhea has stopped, the little attacks of fever have been driven away. But the emaciation is still extreme, and there is still quite a bit of coughing." Despite all the empire's physicians, all the prayers to the gods, she slipped away. 2 years later, in 149, twin boys were born amid great celebration. The empire minted coins showing crossed cornucopia beneath portrait busts of the 2 small boys, with a legend, Temporum Felicitas, the happiness of the times. But happiness in the imperial palace was always fleeting. Before the year ended, both twins were dead, buried in Hadrian's mausoleum where their tiny epitaphs still survive: Titus Aurelius Antoninus and Tiberius Aelius Aurelius. In 152, another son, also named Tiberius Aelius Antoninus, died in infancy. The same year, Marcus lost his sister Cornificia. Then came the loss of another unnamed son in 158. The pattern was relentless, merciless, but perhaps the most devastating blow came in 175 AD. Marcus was campaigning in the east, dealing with the rebellion of Avidius Cassius, when his wife Faustina, his companion for 35 years, the mother of his children, the woman he had written about with such tender love, died suddenly in their military camp in the Taurus Mountains. She was just 45 years old. Marcus was now a man who had buried 8 of his 13 children and the love of his life. The empire still needed him to lead, to make decisions that affected millions, to project strength and wisdom. But inside, he was drowning in an ocean of grief that would have consumed lesser men. The courtiers expected rage against the gods, retreat into madness, or perhaps the kind of cruel tyranny that grief had produced in other emperors. Instead, they witnessed something extraordinary. You won't believe what he did next. Instead of cursing fate or abandoning his duties, Marcus Aurelius turned to his writing desk. In the quiet hours before dawn, by candlelight in his tent, he began to write what would become the Meditations. Not a book intended for publication, but a private dialogue with his own soul about how to endure the unendurable. What emerged from his grief was a revolutionary framework for handling loss that still transforms lives today. Marcus discovered that the key wasn't to avoid pain, but to understand its true nature and our relationship to it. First, he embraced what Stoics call the discipline of desire, the practice of wanting what happens, rather than demanding that what we want should happen. After losing his twin boys, Marcus wrote, "One man prays, how I may not lose my little child, but you must pray, how I may not be afraid to lose him." This wasn't cold indifference, it was profound wisdom. Marcus realized that our suffering comes not from the loss itself, but from our resistance to that loss. When we demand that life conform to our expectations, we set ourselves up for devastation. When we accept that loss is woven into the fabric of existence, we can grieve without being destroyed. Second, Marcus developed what modern psychology would recognize as post-traumatic growth. He wrote, "It's unfortunate that this has happened. No, it's fortunate that this has happened, and I've remained unharmed by it, not shattered by the present or frightened of the future." It could have happened to anyone, but not everyone could have remained unharmed by it. This seems impossible at first. How could losing children be fortunate? But Marcus wasn't being callous. He was recognizing that every tragedy contains within it the seeds of strength. Each loss had taught him something about resilience, about the preciousness of what remains, about his own capacity to endure. Third, Marcus discovered the power of the view from above. When grief threatened to overwhelm him, he would imagine himself from the perspective of eternity. "Think of yourself as dead," he wrote. "You have lived your life. Now take what's left and live it properly." From this cosmic perspective, he could see that his children's brief lives were not failures, but complete stories. Like leaves that fall in their season, they had played their part in the grand cycle of existence. This wasn't resignation. It was acceptance of a deeper order that transcended his personal desires. But here's the most remarkable part. Marcus didn't just survive his losses. He used them to become a better emperor, father, and human being. The depth of his grief gave him profound compassion for the suffering of his subjects. His experience of powerlessness in the face of death made him more humble in the exercise of absolute power. When Faustina died, he could have remarried for political advantage, as Roman emperors typically did. Instead, he chose to honor her memory for the rest of his life, writing, "I'd rather live with her on the prison island of Gyra than on the Palatine without her." And now, let's see how this ancient wisdom can help you navigate your own losses in the modern world. The losses you face may not involve imperial succession, but the emotional devastation is identical. Whether you've lost a parent to cancer, a child to accident or illness, a spouse to sudden death, or even experienced the smaller deaths of divorce, job loss, or shattered dreams, Marcus Aurelius's framework can guide you through the darkness. Let me give you the 3 pillars of Marcus's approach to loss, translated for modern life. Pillar 1. Practice expectant acceptance. This doesn't mean becoming pessimistic or detached. It means recognizing that loss is part of the human contract. Every relationship comes with an expiration date. Either they'll leave us, or we'll leave them. Instead of pretending this isn't true, prepare mentally for it. Modern application. When you love someone, don't love them as if they'll be here forever. Love them knowing that your time together is borrowed. This doesn't diminish your love, it intensifies it. Every conversation becomes precious when you remember it might be the last. Start each day with this thought: everyone I love will someday be gone, and so will I. What really matters today? This isn't morbid, it's liberating. It cuts through trivial concerns and focuses you on what's truly important. Pillar 2. Reframe your story. Marcus chose to see his tragedies as sources of strength rather than evidence of his victimization. You have the same choice. The question isn't, why did this happen to me? But how can I use this to become stronger? Modern application. After loss, resist the urge to define yourself as permanently broken. Yes, you've been changed, but change isn't always damage. Sometimes it's refinement. The Japanese art of kintsugi repairs broken pottery with gold, making it more beautiful than it was originally. Your losses can become the gold that makes your life more precious. Ask yourself, what have I learned about resilience? About the preciousness of life? About my own capacity to endure? Every loss teaches us something about love, about strength, about what really matters. These lessons become part of who you are. Pillar 3. Adopt the eternal perspective. When grief feels overwhelming, step back and see your life from a larger viewpoint. Marcus would remind himself that in 100 years, everyone alive would be dead. In 1,000 years, their names would be forgotten. This wasn't nihilism. It was liberation from the ego's demand that personal suffering be the center of the universe. Modern application. Imagine yourself as an old person looking back on this loss. What would you want to tell your current self? What would matter most from that perspective? Now imagine yourself from the viewpoint of someone 100 years in the future. Your pain is real and valid, but it's also temporary and part of a larger story. This perspective doesn't minimize your grief, it contextualizes it. You're not the first person to lose someone precious, and you won't be the last. You're part of an ancient human tradition of love and loss, and there's dignity in that continuity. But there's one more element to Marcus's approach that might be the most important of all: the practice of memento mori. Marcus kept death constantly in mind, not to become depressed, but to stay focused on what matters. He would remind himself, you could die today. Let this determine what you do and say and think. Modern application. Use your losses as reminders to live more fully, not less. Every person you've lost would want you to experience joy again. They would want their absence to remind you how precious the people who remain in your life truly are. Create rituals that honor your losses while affirming life. Maybe it's visiting a grave on special dates, or donating to a cause that mattered to them, or simply pausing each morning to remember them with gratitude rather than only sadness. The paradox of grief. Here's what Marcus discovered that most people miss. The goal isn't to get over loss, but to integrate it. The people you've loved don't become less important when they die. They become part of who you are. Your grief is the price of having loved them, and paying that price willingly is how you honor what they meant to you. Marcus never got over losing his children, but he learned to carry their memory as a source of strength rather than only sorrow. He transformed his grief from a wound that kept bleeding into a scar that reminded him of his capacity for love. But there's one final lesson for Marcus's life that ties everything together, and it might surprise you.
I have walked this path for so long, searching, and now,
20 years after losing his first child, 5 years after Faustina's death, Marcus Aurelius himself died in 180 AD in a military camp on the Danube frontier. His final words, according to historians, were not complaints about all he had lost, but gratitude for what he had experienced. Go to the rising sun, for I am already setting. The man who had buried 8 children and his beloved wife chose to see his own death not as a tragedy, but as a natural completion. He had learned the deepest secret of human resilience. We don't survive loss by avoiding it, but by allowing it to transform us. The wisdom carved in stone from Marcus Aurelius is this: loss is not the opposite of love. It's love's inevitable companion. The depth of your grief measures the depth of your love, and both are sacred. You honor what you've lost not by remaining broken, but by allowing that breaking to remake you and as someone capable of even deeper compassion and appreciation. In the comments below, I want you to share something. Have you experienced a loss that felt like it would destroy you? How did you find meaning in it? And if you're currently grieving, which of Marcus's 3 pillars, expectant acceptance, reframing your story, or the eternal perspective, speaks most to you right now? Your experience could be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Speaking of finding strength in impossible circumstances, our next video explores another Roman who faced a different kind of devastating loss. Not death, but betrayal by those closest to power. This leader discovered how to transform political destruction into personal liberation, and his strategy for handling betrayal is just as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. Make sure you're subscribed because this lesson could change how you handle trust, loyalty, and the inevitable disappointments that come with both.